Here's a sneak peek of this week's episode. So we ended up doing a 12-night Mediterranean cruise for about $1,500 a piece. The other ones that I was looking at, same period of time, would have been like $4,000 a piece, which would have been like $8,000. So spending about $3,000 for 12 nights to see so many places we felt like an incredible, incredible deal.
I'm Scott.
And I'm Melissa.
And we are the Sunshine Travelers. Our passion is travel and sharing our experiences with those who enjoy it as much as we do, or those who want to learn more about travel, or even those that just want to live vicariously through our travel stories. No matter where you fall along that journey, get ready to hear about our first-hand experiences as we visit some of the most interesting and amazing places on Earth. This week we will be sharing more details about our Mediterranean cruise, where we went, what we did, and a few hints about booking a cruise overseas.
So Scott, we've talked about doing this episode for a while, and so I finally wanted to talk about it because we recently booked another Holland America cruise just recently that we're going to be doing in the Caribbean upcoming in the next couple of months. So I wanted to think it just helped brought back a lot of memories and things that we did. And as we think about what we want to do on this next cruise that we're going to do, that's going to take us to new places that we haven't been. And so I mentioned in that other episode, which if you haven't heard that, the summer trip to Europe, that's episode 7, that when we originally planned that, I was really hesitant to take a cruise because our experience in the past, you just are kind of going to a touristy place and, going to the beach and stuff like that. And I really, because of some of our other travels, I really just wanted to be immersed in the culture and really get to see things. And so, but we ended up settling on this Holland America cruise of the Mediterranean. And I'm really glad that we did.
Well, because you started seeing all the various places that we were going to go to, right? And there were things that were on the bucket list to cross off and see. And
it gave us a way to really see so many places that in that amount of time, you could never even see. Now, obviously, you can't take a deep dive, except for, we did have 2 whole days in Barcelona, which we really did a deep dive into that in the episode on Barcelona. But the other places got to do more than I ever would have imagined with some planning. So let's talk about how we booked it, what the deal was, because we got a great deal on this particular cruise, and some of the basics, and then we'll go into some of the details.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would say is let's start out talking a little bit about the different types of cruises and cruise ships. Right, you can take small cruise ships like the river cruises, that have a couple of hundred people on it, things like that. Holland America is kind of a midline cruise. It's still a very large ship, but it's not as big as the mega cruisers, like the Disney ships and the Carnival and all of those things that are like these huge monster ships. Matter of fact, if you see the Holland America up against one of those other monster ships, it looks like we're on a yacht.
Which you do when you're in port. You're just like, oh, wow. You thought this ship was big when you got on it, but then you see these other ones and you're like, oh, wow. This is not nearly as big. But makes it
really is. It is a big ship, though, because trust me, the first few nights we were on it, I spent a lot of time walking around it. It's a big ship.
It's a big ship, and it has tons of amenities, but it isn't, so massive and so many people. And so once we decided, hey, maybe this is a good idea, we're going to take this 6-week trip. We have just moved. Our son has just graduated. You are transitioning in your job, and it's the first vacation you've had in a long time. And we just need some time to rest and relax. And so this was at the beginning of our trip. And so we decided upon this. So when we started looking, we're probably about 2 months, 6 weeks to 2 months out from booking this.
6 weeks.
And so starting to really see, okay, this is how it's going to line up, and this is kind of the timeline. And we started to see some things were still on sale on some other cruise lines for full price, but zeroed in on this one, and it was an incredible deal that we ended up getting. Saw it, but then I just really wanted to, not having done something like this, I really wanted to talk to somebody. So I found a local travel agent who specialized in cruises and just talked to her on the phone about this. And she was able to figure out how to get this same fare. So we ended up doing a 12-night Mediterranean cruise for about $1,500 a piece. The other ones that I was looking at, same period of time, would have been like $4,000 a piece, which would have been like $8,000. So spending about $3,000 for 12 nights to see so many places we felt like an incredible, incredible deal.
And talking about that travel agent, she had actually been on this ship before. So she was familiar with the exact ship that we were looking at.
Right. And so I think that would be a tip that we would have, is to either talk to a travel agent who is very familiar, or just calling Holland America and, talking to them and having them talk you through, like, what is the ship's layout? What are these rooms going to look like? We knew that we also, and I will say this wasn't an inside cabin either. This was a veranda room, because we knew for that period of time, and then being in those ports, we had done cruises before when we had expensive cruises, when we had not a lot of money, and we had done like an inside cabin before, and we didn't want to do that for 12 days. We wanted to be able to see out. So that was an incredible deal. And she was just able to walk us through, hey, like, this is kind of where you want to be. And so you don't have an obstructed view. And so that would be a tip that we would have in order to do that.
Matter of fact, it was very helpful, because we were trying to decide whether we wanted to pay extra to pick a room ahead of time. And she said, oh, it doesn't matter. Everything that's available in this class, they're all great rooms, and they're all going to have good views. And so, if I was you, I wouldn't pay the extra to book that ahead of time. They're going to assign it to you shortly anyway, and it's going to be a great room.
Yeah. And I think like literally as soon as we booked it, it was like, oh, this is your room. And so then we could go look. And so that was great advice. So she wasn't after, having the upgrade or whatever. So let's talk about the pros and cons of doing the Mediterranean cruise and who this would be good for.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with the con. One of the cons of doing a Mediterranean cruise is you've got the expense of getting from, where we live and where a lot of our current listeners live in North America, over across to somewhere close to the Mediterranean to begin that journey. So there is an additional expense to take that transatlantic flight. And, I know you can find cheap deals at times and stuff like that. But if you're just booking a trip and there's not a cheap airfare deal that you can grab or whatever, you may be looking at, an extra $1,500 or so for that transatlantic flight.
True. But one tip that might want to think about is that you don't necessarily have to fly direct or in one shot from your home airport to, let's say in our case, Rome. And we did not do that because we were doing a longer trip, and we were going to end in London. So we actually had our roundabout trip going in and out of London Heathrow. And so we actually purchased, I believe it was on British Airways, but we actually went and just looked to see, okay, how can we get that worked with our schedule, the most affordable way to get from Heathrow to Rome. And so that might be an option. If you could find a cheaper flight to another city and then do like a budget airline or something that's cheaper to get to your port city.
Now, I know we have quite a number of listeners that are in Europe, and, they have the opportunity to take a lot of various cheap flights, across Europe. And so for them, this is an amazing deal.
Yeah, especially if you could book, you see one pretty last minute that you could book, you really could get a great deal on that. Okay, so what about some pros?
The pros is that, Holland America is a very, I would say, luxurious travel. And so when you go in, the restaurants on the ship are really top end, great food, great service. The ships are nice and clean and modern and updated. So you're going to get a really high-end experience on this cruise. And then I would also say that, we talk a lot about when you go into a city, especially a big city, is doing the hop-on, hop-off bus. This particular cruise, the 12-day or 12-night, I don't remember which one it was, but that particular Mediterranean cruise, think of it like the hop-on, hop-off bus of the Mediterranean.
Yeah. And so it was just a great way to see a lot of stuff. I think it'd be a great way, like if you aren't an experienced traveler and just thinking about, okay, I want to see all this stuff, but I'm overwhelmed with logistics and packing and moving and trains and or airplanes and going a lot of different places. This would be a great introduction, combined with also feeling like a vacation, really. So it's not like sometimes travel can feel exhausting, but this can make it feel like a vacation and you can really get to see a lot of things. And then you are just, you can book excursions through the cruise or you can look on Viator and book those excursions. So I think it would be good for that too. And if you had a mixed group where, sometimes people, like part of the family doesn't want to do everything and stay on the ship, but you can still have a vacation together. That might be another option to do that.
And so this trip is good for families. It's good for single adults. It's good for couples. I would say it's good for anyone who wants to do it. Now, let me say the embarking and debarking the boat and each port city, like if you have mobility issues, there could be some challenges there. Let's call that out and just say that is a truth. It's not impossible. And, they've definitely got ways for everybody to be able to get off the boat and to go see. Then I'm almost certain, I don't remember seeing any, but I'm almost certain that they have some handicap buses and things like that would take you into the city. Now, the question is going to be is what are you going to do once you get into the city? And so you might have some issues, getting around easily and stuff like that. But for the most part, when we got to larger cities, I don't really see why it would be a barrier for anybody. We did talk about a few places that we went to that, getting around if you were in a wheelchair or something like that might be a challenge. But for the most part, I would say anybody could do this trip.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so as we mentioned, we started in Rome. So I did want to give a tip. If you're going to do a Mediterranean cruise, a lot of times they either like Barcelona to Rome, Barcelona to Barcelona, that kind of thing. Couple of things is booking the flights. You can also book multi-city flights. So just being aware of that, like you don't have to go in and out of the same city. And a lot of people think that that's cheaper to do that, but it's not necessarily cheaper to do that. And in other episodes, we've mentioned that trip that we did that was like Zurich, and then we ended up in Ireland and we took a flight in between those. So our round trip for Delta was like into Zurich and out of Dublin. And it actually ended up being less than, I remember when you called and had to change the flight, kind of last minute, it actually ended up being less than our Dublin to Dublin flight. And it was just like, oh, here's if it was points or refund or credit or whatever that we had to do. So don't think that you have to go in and out of the same city, just being able to, check those multi-city flights. And then the other thing I would say, a lot of times people think, okay, we can, then they provide, or you can book, transportation from your hotel, and it can be a taxi or you can get a taxi. We opted to take the train because we were staying in Rome the night before. And so that would be our other tip too, is when you're doing a cruise like this, especially something overseas, like get there the day before, just to give yourself the leeway. Don't try to land that day just with delays and stuff like that. So we arrived the day before. And so we opted to take the train, and we were like, oh, okay, I think we probably need to buy these train tickets. So what was funny about that is we took the train from the hotel, waited at the station till like our train was going to leave, and we'd explored on the train a little bit. And so as we were going to the port, we literally passed a station that we had gone through earlier that morning. And we were like, okay. So we'd already purchased our return like after the cruise. So we knew then, okay, we don't have to go all the way to this particular station in Rome. Then when we saw that station, we're like, okay, we can get off here and make the connection and, go back to the hotel that we were staying at again and stuff like that. So just little logistics tip is just, just not knowing. Not a big deal. But
and we don't mind taking the train. We had gotten used to in our numerous trips to the UK and stuff like that, is taking the train for local transportation. That might be intimidating to someone. So you can take a taxi. It's a good ride. I mean, it seemed like there was a good 30 minutes or so on the train. So, prepare that it's going to be a rather expensive taxi, but you can do that. And if you're looking for ways to cut down on your overall cost, you want to pay for a couple of meals, well, maybe the train is a good way to save that money. So let's talk a little bit about places that we visited on this trip.
So this particular trip was going to Cartagena, Spain, then on to Gibraltar. So that was really cool because it was like, oh, how would we ever, Gibraltar's kind of down there. How are we going to get to Gibraltar? Cadiz is the port city. And then we actually chose to go to Sevilla, Malaga, another port city where we were going to go to Granada and see the Alhambra. We had a couple of days at sea. We had a couple of days in Barcelona and an overnight in Barcelona, Marseille, and so we could go into Provence and then Monte Carlo. So you could see Monaco. We actually went over to Nice and then Livorno. And so from there, you could choose to go to Pisa or Cinque Terre or Tuscany or Florence and then back to Rome.
When you go on these cruises, there's often days where you're traveling at sea. Right, so not every day is booked. It's the ship parked in a port city, right? So you're going to have some travel at sea days,
and those are actually really nice because it's almost like thinking about like if you're going to Disney World and then like having your non-park day or your rest day or something like that. It was actually really nice. Now, the way this worked, because it went from Rome, our very first day was the day at sea to get all the way over to Spain. But that was great for us. We had done all our travel. We'd had half a day in Rome. Of course, we talked about, all the things that we had just done, life experiences. And so that was a good way for us to just rest. So one of the days at sea, we actually had booked a wine blending class to like teach you a little bit about, how like wine blends are and, tasting that and being able to do that. And other than that, it was just a time for rest and relaxation, going to the pool, and that was pretty much all we did. But of course, they have the casinos and the shows and all the things.
So that wine blending class was neat because it teaches you to be like a master vintner who's, choosing the different grapes and the different wines and using the taste to create a certain profile. And, not just, hey, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, they taught you how to build the right proportions and stuff like that. And the cool part was at the end, you got to take the bottle of wine that you just made, and then you could have it, they would save it for you and you could have it at the dinners that you would have at night on the cruise ship.
Yeah, I thought it was really neat because you were mixing up in like a small little quantity, right? And so then you're having to like, okay, I get it the way I want it. This tastes good. And then you're having to do the proportions of it to make like the whole bottle. So for me, the whole math, proportion thing, that was like, okay, this is cool. This is how this works, and get to have that special bottle.
As we're watching Ted Lasso right now, the maths.
The math. So they definitely have a spa on board. We would recommend that if you plan though to do a massage or spot treatment or something like that, you probably do want to book in advance or at least check right at the beginning. I will say I did have my nails done one day. And Scott reminded me of this as we were chatting to do this episode, is she was telling me that they also provided acupuncture on the cruise. And acupuncture can be a great way to help you with seasickness. So she was actually from Africa, and this was, a job she had taken on. She'd never been on a ship. And so she said the very beginning and having to cross that Drake Passage, like we've talked about in the Antarctica episode, is getting so sick. And then they're like, okay, you need to do this acupuncture. And she said she's been fine ever since. Now, I'm sure being on the ship all the time, having your sea legs, but she said that acupuncture really helps. So that might be something that you want to do before you go if you have somebody, or, book it on the ship.
So we were talking about today, and I'm actually thinking about going and, our chiropractor knows someone who does acupuncture, and doing this before we go on our cruise a little later this year. And so, to my new friend Colin, I'm going to see if this works. And if it works, I'll definitely let you know.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And because we also have mentioned, so we booked this cruise for in November, and we were like, oh, we're never going to do a cruise that time of the year. But here we go. So hopefully we'll have to report back and see how that works. So what else did we do on the ship? So I mentioned we did the pool one day. A lot of times in we would be out and about all day. We would come back. And so we would either, just depending on how we felt, we would either have dinner in the dining room, or they had places that was almost like a quick, you could like tell them, okay, they're like personal pizzas, and you could tell them, here's everything I want. We would just do that. We would watch movies at night and just rest. They did have a casino. I think one of the nights we did that. Since we were in Spain for part of the time, they had a flamenco dance show that you could go see. And I think we did the buffet once, and it was just like, oh, okay, we're going to eat in the restaurants. Most of the days that we did the excursions, because you do have to get up and get going like 8 or 8:30, we would actually order the room service that's part of the cruise. It's not extra or anything like that. We would have the breakfast brought to us, and so we could like be getting ready and eating at the same time.
Have a pot of coffee. Let's talk about this for just 1 minute. The buffets. If you have kids and they don't do well sitting at dinner table and waiting on, service and stuff like that, I guess it's fine. But my recommendation is skip the buffets. They have table service for every meal, and you get food that is prepared and brought out to you. Much higher quality food, right? As well, that they'll bring to you and do full on table service. And that is the value that you're paying for, not the Western Corral or Western Sizzlin' or whatever they call them, Golden Corral buffet, right? And so when you settle for the buffet, you're almost not getting the value that you're paying for. Because if you go in that restaurant, you're getting that, white linen service from the staff. And by the way, you're paying for it whether you use it or not. So I think that was our biggest thing about the buffets versus the restaurants.
Yeah. And like I said, we're in a hurry one time and we just did it. And we're like, okay, yeah, the food was so much better. So the days that we were at sea, I think we got dressed and like went and had breakfast in the dining room. And of course, knowing us and that we like to talk, and on the podcast, like we don't mind sitting at the table with other people and getting to know other people, but that you absolutely could have a table. Like if it's just a couple, you could absolutely request a table for two and, just have the two of you. I think we did that one night when we were just like, okay, we just need a night to ourselves and we want to eat in the dining room. So lots of food options, but I do remember like having the breakfast delivered was a great option as well.
So one of the things they have at night, and when you're visiting a lot of locations like this, I highly recommend this, is they had a presentation. So they would bring someone in to talk about the next city or 2 cities away or, whatever it was. And so you could go listen to this presentation and then you could make your mind up about what it was that you wanted to do. But you also learned a little bit more about where you're going, what was there, kind of what was the special things to see and stuff like that. And so those are really high value presentations, to go and spend your time in. And basically it's just the company who organizes all of the tours is putting this on. But, we've told you, you can, if you want to do it for simplicity and you want to book it straight through the cruise line, you can. But you also can find a lot of times the exact same tour available through Viator as well. And so, that's really just up to you and your comfort level, and whether you're trying to maybe save a little bit of money on your budget, or if budget's not a problem, by all means, it's probably the most simplest to book it directly through the cruise line.
Yeah, but they did provide great information. And I think that was how we happened upon the day that we were going to the Cadiz port, is not really having a plan. And they had transportation where it was literally just transportation to Sevilla. So we're like, oh, that would be a great way to just like get there, the simplest way to get there, instead of, like trying to hire just a car for us or something like that. So I think that's how we learned about it. The other tip that I would have is that the travel books, like the ones that I like the Rick Steves books, yes, they do have the country. So I could have gotten Spain and I could have gotten France. And they also have one that's just for the Mediterranean. And so they've basically taken those portions that you would, see and compile those in a book. I actually downloaded it to my Kindle just so I wouldn't have, we were packing light, so I wouldn't have a book, I would just have it in the Kindle. So at night, sometimes we would watch movies. And then I would just kind of see, okay, what are the highlights? What are the things that we don't want to miss as well?
Let's just rapid fire a little bit more about the ship. And I think this is pretty common on all ships, right? You're going to have a pool. You're going to have a hot tub. I think that's standard fare. Now, what's going to change is, do they have big, huge, slides like that for the kids and stuff like that? That would probably be the differentiator there. They're almost all going to have a running track. So if you enjoy getting up in the morning and going for a run, they have running tracks on them, places to play basketball. I think all of them have started adding pickleball. So if you're an avid pickleballer, you can do that. And then they also have full gymnasiums for your use. And if you're, eating every one of these meals that they're offering, you might want to use that gym. But then one of the things that we liked about the Holland America, and Melissa really enjoyed this, was the coffee shop. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so they had a coffee shop just like on the main level. It's called the Grand Dutch Cafe. And now this was extra because it was like the specialty coffees, right? So espresso drinks and stuff like that. But just having some really good espresso drinks. A lot of times we would have the breakfast in the room and have like the pot coffee, but we might go and grab a cup of coffee as we were leaving and, having it made to order. Or then sometimes I think getting back on the ship, it was like, oh, let's stop and, have a cup of coffee. And they had a place where you could sit as well, and have it in real cups and things like that. So that was a nice thing to have. And a couple of other tips as far as the ship that we had been told that we would like to pass along that were really helpful is that once you get on is start to just try to explore a little bit. And so Scott did mention he thinks that they have just like little tours and stuff that you can do that shows you everything. But go ahead and try to explore a little bit and just see like, okay, where are we going to be eating? Where is the gym? Where are the different restaurants? Where are the running track? And just kind of look and see, because you hate to find something like toward the end of the trip that you would have enjoyed seeing. I know that you had actually found, we didn't find this at the very beginning, but you had found it on one of your night walks when you were having your jet lag, is like they had like a lounge area in the front of the ship and you could go in there and they had magazines and newspapers, but it had it was like in the front of the ship where you could see out, like see where you were going as well. So just figuring that out. And then number 2 is to unpack when you get into your cabin. So once you get your things, now we had our e-bag backpacks. And so we didn't like check anything that they had to bring through. And we were like, oh, well, we've had it on our back all this time. We can just bring it. So we went straight to our cabin, unpacked everything, kind of got settled because you are in tight quarters. I mean, the rooms were spacious, but it's a cruise ship, right? So figuring out, okay, my clothes are going here. I'm putting my suitcase up, having a place for them under the bed, and just really feeling settled for that 12-day journey. I thought that was a really great tip that I had read, I think in the Rick Steves books.
Living out, a drawer, like a dresser drawer versus living out of a backpack. It's it just makes you feel, like you said, more settled in and, more comfortable. One of the things that we talked about as well is, and this is going to depend on how you cruise. If you're someone who stays on the boat and you're not going to get off in all these port cities, you're just there to relax, be on the ship the whole time, hang out by the pool, and stuff like that, go to the casinos. You might want to look into the drink package. But if you're someone like us, where you might be on the ship for like a day or a couple of days as you're cruising, but the rest of the time you're going to be getting off the boat just as soon as it docks, and you're going to be heading out, and you're going to stay active and busy until you come back. And by the way, you're going to be exhausted, and so you're not going to hang around and stuff like that. You're probably going to want to go back to your room. We wouldn't suggest that you would buy the drink package on the boat. You're just not going to get your value out of it. But like I said, if you're going to spend most of your time on the ship and that's something that you enjoy, then by all means, you probably want to take advantage of that.
Yeah. So we just did that a la carte as we wanted to, because like we mentioned, we were one night in Barcelona. And then when we were in Gibraltar, that was actually a late evening. It was like ported later in a late evening. And so it was just like a few things a la carte here and there, which ended up being just a better value for us.
Have a drink at dinner, and it's just it wasn't a value for us. We did want to mention that it is an option. You can get those drink packages, including for your kids. You can have soft drinks if you want them to have all of the sugar and caffeine and stuff like that, unlimited. It's there. If not, then you might want to consider not buying that for them.
So let's talk a little bit about how we decided what to do in each city. We really just started looking at, okay, where is it going to port? And then I just started looking at what excursions is the cruise offering, and then referencing the book, and then seeing, okay, what kind of things do we want to do? And then also, we didn't really want to do an excursion and a tour in each city, because that would give us more time to just explore on our own, and then also help us to save costs. Because as we've mentioned, this was part of a bigger trip. And so just being conscious of that as well. One of the big ones was to go in Granada to go see the Alhambra. And so immediately when we booked that, checking that one out, and it was already sold out. And that was, again, how we ended up booking that same tour on Viator. And then looking at, for example, in Livorno, saying, okay, we really want to go to Tuscany. What can we do? How can we efficiently have a highlight day? But really for the other days.
Let's talk about that one real quick.
Okay.
In Livorno, we had the option of going, you said, to Pisa, Cinque Terre, or Tuscany. And so we chose Tuscany. Kind of what were the reasons why not the other two? I know Tuscany, you get to go to this wine region and stuff like that. But the Leaning Tower of Pisa,
I think because people had just said, for the whole day, okay, that's what you go see, which that is cool. And yes, that's still on the list. But I think for us, it was okay, what realistically, what we enjoy most? What would we say if we hadn't gone to Tuscany? What would we have missed most? I guess. So it's totally personal
and knowing
preference.
That we want to go back to Cinque Terre, right?
Yes.
And spend time there.
And for that you could also go to Florence too. But for those, it's you would spend so much time getting there. Would you really have a lot of time to spend? And so this particular excursion was okay, we're going to be in a car with a driver. He's going to take us and kind of manage our timeline, make it efficient to be able to see those things. So I think it was just a matter of, making that choice as well.
And so on that, we chose to go to the Tenuta Torciano winery. And I remember we passed by the area where the tour guide was telling us Andrea Bocelli does his big tour or big concert every year for the people. And he said the place is just packed with everyone coming in to see Andrea Bocelli. And sort of immediately I was oh my God, we've got to come back here and try to figure out how to get into that.
Yeah, because he was just saying okay, it's on this, this road, and it's just packed with cars, and just all of these people come. So that seemed really neat. So for the rest of the cities, it was really just kind of exploring on our own. In Cartagena, Spain, they had recently discovered some Roman ruins. So it was really just about...
Surprise, Roman ruins.
It was really just about, we just kind of went to a few museums and to the archaeological sites. But it was just a great way to just stretch our legs and kind of get a feel for, okay, what's this going to be like? Getting off on these different port cities, and found a place for lunch. And
I always tell my friends that live in Europe, be careful going out in the garden and digging. You might find some Roman ruins, and then all of a sudden you're messed up.
And then Gibraltar, the same thing. We didn't book anything in particular. We just figured out, how to get to the place where you could go up to, I guess it was a cable car, I think, right? It was a cable car. You could see the monkeys and go to all the different, the sites there. And so that's really, I think, where also having the guidebook came in handy, because in that one in particular, they kind of told you, okay, this is where you need to be able to get to, but go online in advance and buy these tickets. You didn't have to, but there was a long line. I don't know if you remember that. There was a long queue once we got there, and I was oh, I already have the tickets. I was oh, thank goodness we can, get there quickly. And then Sevilla, we mentioned we did buy the transportation excursion, I think, through the cruise, and then just kind of explored that on our own. And then deep dive into Barcelona, go listen to our Barcelona episode. We'll talk about everything that we did. We explored all that on our own. And then in Marseille, we just decided to take a train. So they have a lot of taxis, like when you get off the ship. So for there, the train station was further. And so we took a taxi into the train station, and we actually took the train to Aix-en-Provence that day and just made sure that we would be back in time to take the taxi back. Had lunch, had a picnic, just wandered. Monaco, we actually did a bunch of things. I think that was another one where going and listening to the talk was really helpful, because they were the ones who told us, I think, hey, go to this particular place and you can take your passport with you. You can get it stamped. We took the train to Nice and spent part of the day. I don't know how we did all that in the same day. Came back to the ship, got dressed, went back to the casino. So like we really packed it in that day. It was in that port a little bit longer. And then of course, Scott mentioned the day in Tuscany. So it was really just about having a guidebook and, doing some research online. Some of the stuff we booked ahead of time, and then some of the stuff we just kind of did spur of the moment.
So one of the things we often talk about is brand loyalty, right? As much as Delta has infuriated me with their new medallion guidelines, there's still some value there to, sticking to a certain brand. We love Marriott properties all over the world and have stayed at a bunch of them. But, we kind of have gravitated to Holland America for cruises. And so what are some other places to go on Holland America?
So one thing that, because we did this cruise, I have since then gotten the emails and gotten flyers that they mail to you and talks about different things. So Holland America goes all over the world. And so that was what was interesting about talking to the lady in the spa that day, because the crew basically, they're traveling, they're going all over the world as these ships go to these different places. So with Holland America, you can do extended, you can go to,
I don't know, you've recently showed me some 50-something day trips and stuff like that you want to do on Holland America.
Yeah, so they've got ones that do Australia with New Zealand. And actually the cruise that we did was we were on there for the 12 days, but there were people who were going to stay on that ship when we got off, and we're going to go on and do the Greek Isles. So these ships do travel. So one of the ones that I looked at recently, it ported so that you could go to Morocco and then over to Egypt and then the Nile and then out to Madagascar, Antarctica, Alaska. They go to places in Mexico, lots of destinations in the Caribbean. So basically all over the world, you could find cruises, Antarctica, South America. You can do a world voyage on Holland America as well. So
next time I have the ability to take multiple, when I say multiple, 6 to 8 weeks off, we've got to do that one that you were just talking about. And by the way, we found out that the New Zealand and Australia cruise actually leaves from San Diego.
Yeah, so that would be a great way if you don't want to do that long flight, and you can get to San Diego. I think one of them stops in Hawaii and then cruises on. So that would
really
be
cool.
That would be a great way to do that. And they are not as expensive as you would think.
Yeah. And then we've also recently learned, if you are a casino loyalty member, got lots of people in my family who love to play slot machines, right? And, you can get the casino loyalty rewards. We found out that they do a status match to those casinos.
Yeah, so you recently matched our Marriott status when you were out in Vegas to Caesars. So Caesars is converting over from a Hyatt.
Wyndham.
From a Wyndham affiliation, I guess, to a Marriott. And so you had to actually go out there, but you were out there. And so they matched that. And then another friend had told us that, check into the Holland America, because then for the casino, they also match and give you a deal. So the deal is basically a free cruise inside state cabin. And when I say free, yes, you have to pay the port fees and the taxes, which are way less than a cruise would be. But basically with this one, you just had to use it before your match period ended. And you could go anywhere that didn't include Christmas and New Year's, and anywhere that was still on the docket for the rest of the year. So unfortunately, like you could have done Alaska, you could have done New England, and still to go, you could have done the Caribbean and Mexico. And so the one that worked out for us is the Caribbean. So we have planned one that goes to 3 new places that we have not been. And so we're going to use some of these techniques. We did decide to upgrade and do that veranda room and pay a little bit of extra, which Holland America, I'm sure, appreciates.
And I think one of the things that you also get is like they give you some casino credits or free play while you're on the ship, stuff like that. So, it'll be fun. We're not big gamblers, but when I'm playing with somebody else's money, I'm fine with that.
And I do have to say, you did teach me how to play craps when we did this Mediterranean cruise. Yeah. You did take me to the casino. And
hey, Ash, come on, buddy. You got to come go with us on a cruise so you can show Melissa how to play craps, because I've forgotten everything that you showed me.
So I'm going to put a couple of different links in the show notes. One of them is going to be that status match. You just have to go in and you have to upload information that you have, and then they email you back, and then you call to book it. And then also just a link if you're interested in looking at some of these cruises. You get a referral bonus. We would get a referral bonus if you end up booking a cruise in the form of onboard credit.
All right. Well, this is similar to a destination episode. And anytime we have a destination episode, we ask Melissa, what do you need to pack for this Mediterranean cruise? And I would say specifically on Holland America, right? Because different ships have different requirements around dress code for dinner and things like that. So let's talk about it in terms of this Holland America cruise and what do we need to pack.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. I do think a lot of these ships are getting away from like having these like super dressy and super formal nights. In which, of course, if you had that and you didn't want to do that, you could just opt out of going to that particular meal. They did not have that on this cruise. And so basically for dinner, yes, we wanted to dress a little bit nicer. And so we took along things like sundresses, and I took a couple of pairs of pants. I don't know. Did you take any pants or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Pants.
But I think even dressy shorts and a collar shirt, just so you feel comfortable going to dinner. Some people dressed up more than others. So because this was part of that longer trip and we did that e-bag backpack, I had that bag, and then I had like a handbag, a purse that I could fold up and then, put in that, or I could use it for like taking to the beach. But basically, I had a couple of sundresses. Of course, you want to have your swimsuits. And then the coverup that I took also could double as a dress as well. We both took along tennis shoes that were good for walking different places and working out as well. I took one workout outfit. I just did something black pants, black tank, so that it was something that you could wear out as well. As I mentioned, a pair of pants, and I had a pair of leggings, a couple of pairs of shorts, and then a pair of sandals that I could take to the beach. And with dressier things, which ended up being a pair of Birkenstocks, and then several shirts that would work with lots of different things. But I will mention that we actually ended up, before we got off the ship, so probably the last day that they would have allowed you to do laundry, we actually sent all of our dirty clothes off to the laundry. And it was more expensive than doing it like in a city, but less expensive than I would have imagined. Like imagine, when you go to the hotel and you send something to the laundry, it seems like they charge you an arm and a leg. And this was like, oh, everything you can fit in this bag for X amount of money. So we did that, and that just simplified it for not having to do laundry like right away. I did remember they put these little tags, right? I guess it was like almost little barcode tags, so things wouldn't get lost in like in the neck or in the pants or something like that. And I do still, obviously, I think when you travel, you take like your very favorite things, and some of those things I still wear. And they have those little tags. And so every time, I see those little tags in those clothes, I just think about this trip. So that was a great way to do that and have those to be able to continue on. Anything else that you took that you would recommend?
You asked did I have pants, and I think I took a pair of linen pants that I would wear to dinner, something very lightweight, wouldn't take up a lot of room in my bag, wouldn't weigh, very much. And so I think that's what I would often wear into the restaurant.
Yeah, we didn't do anything super dressy or anything like that, but and it was summertime, so that did help as well. I think we had a rain jacket as well.
I can't believe that we were able to do so much on this trip. My experience with cruises prior to this was getting off in the port cities, maybe grabbing a bite to eat, and then getting back on the cruise to move off to our next destination. I'm so thankful that we adventured beyond the cruise ports and enjoyed experiencing the local cultures. I recently got my old passport back in the mail, and it was fun reminiscing about some of the places that we visited, like getting our passport stamped in Monaco. I wonder how many of our listeners have a passport stamp from there. If you have a really cool, really unique place that's stamped in your passport, leave us a note. Let us know about it. We love hearing from you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and will find some inspiration to help you on your travel journeys. Please consider going on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. The more 5-star reviews we have, the more likely we are to be featured and discovered by others. Make sure to follow or subscribe to our podcast to be notified of new episodes as they are released. You can also find us on Instagram at Sunshine Travelers Podcast. Remember, that's travelers with 1 L. Most importantly, share it with your friends and help them catch the travel bug. You never know, they may become your greatest travel companion.